Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for September 26th. Housekeeping reminder to silence your cell phones for our meeting. Today we have 12 actionable items on our agenda. I have been asked to pull the following items: 3 and 4, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Is there anybody in the audience that is here about any of the items that haven't been pulled? So what will happen is items 3, 4, 9, 10, 11, and 12 will be individually discussed. The other items will pass probably on a consent motion based on the recommendations in the write-up from the staff. So if you're here about either 1 or 2, 5, 6, 7, or 8, let me know, and if you want to discuss that individually, we'll pull it for you. Seeing no one, is there a motion?
Move approval.
Okay, a consent motion for 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion? Call the roll.
Olson? Yes. Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Wolski?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes. Motion carried. That brings us to item number 3, the Cutting Edges Award of Bid. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Wolski.
Second.
Seconded by Olson. Discussion.
President
Alderman
Janser.
Wolski.
Question likely for our Public Works Director. Dan, just curious about how this purchase is executed. Do we kind of purchase our cutting blades as needed, or do we buy them in bulk at the beginning of the season? Just want to get a sense of how we operate in this area.
Public Works Director.
Mr. President, Alderman Wolski, we order them at a truckload at a time. When we bid them, that's the way we bid them, to receive them a truckload at a time, and typically we'll get around 600 or 800 of them at a time when they come in.
Continue.
Dan, what happens in situations, and I don't know, what the rate of usage is on cutting blades, but it felt like last winter we didn't have quite as much snow. Do we continue to budget the same amount on an annual basis regardless of usage? Do we end up in a year like last year with a significant overage compared to what is typically forecast?
Mr. President, Alderman Wolski, yeah, it's really a variable. Like I said, we try to keep several hundred on hand at all times, because during any given storm, you can go through in a 24-hour period with 8 blades running. You can go through 40, 60 blades pretty easily, depending on the type of storm that's through it. So, yeah, we budget about the same amount. We do look at what we have in inventory when we're putting the bids out from the prior year, if there's any left over of what we have. And also, I just want to add that, for the remaining part of this year, up until the first of the year, we're still working off of last year's contract. So this contract is for the 2019 fiscal year. But yeah, we do look at all that as when we're putting the budget together as to what we have left in inventory and about what we use over a year.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions for the Public Works Director? All right. Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Wolski?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson? Yes. Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Motion carried. Item 4 is the Water Plant Chemicals Award of Bid. Is there a motion?
Move.
Moved by Padragula.
Second.
Second by Pittner.
Sure.
Discussion. Alderman Padragula.
I had 2 questions based on a phone call from a constituent regarding the lime part of the bid. I know we talked about this at length last year, and I had some follow-up in terms of that. If we could have Jason, I think's the lime guy. I noticed that this year's bid for the lime chemicals, the low bid was from Lahoist again, or Lahoist, however we pronounce it, Lahoist, and their bid was $138 a ton, and last year's was $128. And I noted in the summary of the item that it said there were significant fluctuations in chemicals. Is this kind of an increase significant, or is it normal kind of variation?
President Janser, Alderman Padragula, I would say it's probably, typical. Before this year, I think lime was coming into the water plant at about 136-ish. Lawas came in this year at 128. I think shortly thereafter they had some. I think their local trucker, it was a little more time. So I think that's where they saw some cost increases coming into this year.
So you don't see this as any kind of nefarious plot for them to low bid it last year and jack up the prices every year?
Right. This year, based on some of the conversation we had last year, we bid lime for contract year 2019 with the option to extend for 2 additional years. And there's a cap on what that increase can be, so they're pretty confident with the number that they put down on paper this year to supply it for 2 additional years.
And I didn't mean to be flippant, but the person who called me was very concerned that there were some things going on that shouldn't have been going on. And I think the concern we had, too, is that last year this big company was coming in, and were they going to corner the market with a low bid and then kind of have us at their mercy. So I didn't think that was happening, but I wanted to be sure. The second question I had was in terms of the quality of the lime. I think last year we had some discussion. It wasn't about bioavailability, but something similar, how much carbon or whatever there was in it that was usable.
Calcium oxide.
Calcium oxide, okay. Do you have any concerns about that, even with the different bids, or are you still thinking in terms of that calcium content that this is still the best bid?
Yeah, actually, the lime that we're getting from Lawas, that's probably the best quality lime that we've used in about the last 10 years.
Wow.
They have to submit their 3-month average available calcium oxide. And last year when we went through this, Pete Lean out of South Dakota there was about a 4% difference on paper. We've been charting this ever since we started using it in January, and the difference is closer to about 7%.
Thanks, if you're reassured.
Yep.
I guess I remember the discussion from last year, and I at that time argued kind of adamantly that we take the low bid, and I would point out that we're doing that again, and it happens to be the same company, but I think we're doing the right thing by the taxpayers, both in terms of taking a low bid and the quality issues that you mentioned. So I appreciate that. Any further questions? Alderman Wolski?
President Janser, thanks. I would echo all those comments. I appreciate Alderman Padragula digging in to pull out a little bit more information. The part of this agenda item that I noticed was that the company that the local company, the local trucking company that was a part of the conversation last year was not a participant in this year's bidding process. I saw that, and I just thought to myself that that's unfortunate. My hope in having these discussions and making these choices is that we aren't discouraging local businesses. I think in this point we're making the right choice. I voted against it last year, but I think the council ultimately made the right choice. So I'm going to support this motion today. Jason, as you mentioned, the option to extend the contract for 2 additional years, is that a practice that we are deploying specifically to the lime? Is that something we want to look at for all the water treatment chemicals? Is there a reason we're picking that particular piece out to add some additional flexibility?
President Janser, Alderman Wolski, so basically the other products are, no matter who you get them from, they're the same. Lime is the one that's variable. It comes from a different mine in 3 different states. So, and that's, of our $900,000, we spend over $600,000 a year on lime. So that's the one that has by far the biggest impact on our budget and our treatment process. So that was the one we've targeted for the extended contracts.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you very much, Jason. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Padragula.
Yes.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner.
Yes.
Motion carried. That takes us down to item number 9, which is the retail beer and wine license for the House Party LLC DBA, the House Party. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Wolski,
Second.
second by Pittner. Discussion.
President Janser.
Alderman Wolski.
I pulled this simply hoping that somebody from House Party LLC would be here because I'm curious about what the concept is. So just hoping you might take a minute and tell us what you're planning.
Good afternoon. Can you please identify yourself?
I'm Rebecca Alvarez. I'm the owner of the House Party. So basically what we're trying to create is a fun atmosphere for adults. Kind of have two atmospheres going on. I have more of like a beer and wine, elegant beer garden going on, and then the other side would be more of like a dancing, letting loose, enjoying fun music. Basically, that's kind of it.
Okay. President Janser, thank you. We're looking for people who are willing to make investments in Minot and downtown. Appreciate you guys taking the risk.
Thank you.
Get any further discussion? All right, call the roll, please.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Item carried. Item number 10 is the landfill cell 6 contract amendment. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Moved by Alderman Olson,
Second.
second by Alderman Padragula. Discussion. Alderman Wolski.
President Janser, I would say contract performance, the carrots and sticks that we put in our contracts has been an issue we've talked about here in the past many times. I look at this and I see, another example where the liquidated damages were set at a point high enough to cover the cost of the engineering firm, but there is, it seems to be little accounted for in terms of the damages and the timeline extensions to the city itself. And so I think this is a topic that, I know Minot isn't the only municipality struggling with how to ensure better performance, how to get better results, how to deliver more accountability. I pulled it to simply add that comment and make sure that we're keeping that effort front and center.
Alderman Padragula.
I wanted to follow up on that and echo Josh's comment. I think when we had the budget session, I talked about maybe we should be adding a contracting officer. Obviously, we don't have the money. But I would also echo your concerns about carrots and sticks. Maybe we don't need a person, but I'd like to see the administration, look at this carefully in our legal department, or legal person, not department. I remember the old days when we built the overpass over on Burdick by the old St. Joe's Hospital. If I remember correctly, it was something like 4 or 6 weeks early, and the company got a very nice bonus, and it really made a huge difference in people's convenience being able to use that viaduct, that bridge. So I guess I'd encourage the administration to monitor that, and maybe at some point next couple months, just give us a very quick update on where we are, and if there's anything we need to do as a council to encourage promptness and performance and completion. I know too that we have at least covered the engineering costs, but to me it seems like that's just part of it. So if we could get a little, I guess we're going to get an update right now maybe as to kind of what the state of the art is with municipalities and the issue of carrots and sticks. As a psychologist, I know that carrots usually are much more effective than sticks, although occasionally need sticks.
City engineer, you wish to comment?
Mr. President, just a general comment, not specific to this project because it's not mine, but I think the biggest stick that you can carry as a city council is to not award work to bad performers. I can put liquidated damage clauses in and we do, in every contract that we have, but to some contractors, it just really doesn't matter. We've had some contracts with over $100,000 in liquidated damages, and they just kind of shrug their shoulders like, well, it's too bad. So if we have any more tools, I would love to know about it, but I think the only thing we can really do on some of these is just not award the work. And we have the ability to do that if we have enough case history to say that they're not a competent contractor. We tried to do that before that didn't happen, and you know, it is what it is, but those are some things I think we need to think about.
Lance, are you continuing to keep book on the performance?
We do.
Okay. And I don't see it here in the right, who is the contractor on this particular project?
That I don't know. I wasn't trying to specifically talk about this contract and this contractor. I'm just saying in general, we are noticing a trend. We have a lot of contractors that miss contract dates. And our liquidated damage schedule is modeled after what the DOT charges. And the DOT got to that liquidated damage schedule based on conversations with the Association of General Contractors years ago. And they all agreed that, you know, these are not penalties. These are based on the size of the project. These would be adequate amounts. And it can't be arbitrary. It has to be tied to something, and that's why all of our contracts that are modeled in the EJCDC format say that the city and the contractor sign a contract that says these are not punitive damages. Everyone realizes that we can't account for every cost or every damage that every citizen may have out there, so we agree upon this amount for this contract size.
Okay.
And so we have to be a little bit careful with that, but at the same time, we don't have very many other tools to use for these sort of situations.
Because one of the questions I had when I got through the write-up on this was that, you know, in some cases in the past, it seems like the liquidated damages have covered or more than covered the overage with, say, the engineering firm, which is typically what gets extended. But in this case, it doesn't. And so that was, you know, kind of surprise to me, I guess. But
Right. We've had instances on both.
both ways?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Alderman Wolski.
Thank you, President Janser. Probably a question for Dan, actually, or Jason, as it specifically relates to this project. I noticed in the write-up that one of the reasons this situation occurred is because the contractor mobilized 6 weeks later than we were hoping for. When we write the initial specifications, does that include a mobilization date by which they must be working and/or active?
President Janser, Alderman Wolski, once we get contracts signed, we issue a notice to proceed. And that's their date to start and get the project done. That's when the clock starts ticking. Like I said in my memo, they didn't start for another 6 weeks after that. They were tied up with 3 other projects. That's their excuse, which is no concern of ours. You know, they bid a project with a date to start and a date to complete it, and they didn't meet it.
Okay.
President Janser.
Continue.
You know, if I might, as I look at that example, and you know, I wonder if it's possible to write into a contract you shall be working by date, and so the liquidated damages begin, you know, immediately in some respects, whether the project's completed or not. You know, this would be one of those situations where if they had gotten to work when they could have, the whole event might have been. So again, as we evaluate our contracts, that would be a piece where I would say the responsibility to deliver that lies with our engineering firms. They're the ones writing the specifications for us on these projects. And in all of these equations, I know I'm accountable because I know the public talks to me. I know you're accountable because I'm talking to you. I know the contractor's accountable because we're assessing them liquidated damages. But somewhere in this equation, it feels like sometimes the engineering firms they aren't a part of that same accountability chain. And so as I see situations where I wonder if the contracts can't be improved, I think, you know, those engineering firms might be places where we begin to apply some of the pressure to improve this process a little bit. So,
just a little bit to that. This is about a $1.3, $1.4 million contract, which on the grand scheme of things, for some of the stuff that we are going is a relatively small project. And it's really, it was one piece. You dig a hole, you line it, but to what you're talking about, Alderman Wolski, some of our big projects where, they might take over the course of 2 years or longer, we have milestones that are built in. So you will, be constructed up to point A by a certain date. Otherwise, there's basically 3 different points along the contract where LDs can kick in. On this one, like I said, there weren't really separate parts to set milestones to. And, had we known that they had a bunch of other projects lined up, yeah, maybe a start date milestone would have been a good one to have in there.
Okay, further question? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Wolski?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes. That motion passes. Item number 11 is the NAS Adaptive Management Plan MOU with the Bureau of Reclamation. Is there a motion?
President Janser.
Moved by Wolski.
Moved by Sitma.
Moved by Sitma.
Second.
Seconded by Pittner. Discussion. Alderman Wolski.
President Janser, thanks. I was wondering if Mayor Sitma might clarify the motion a little bit. The abbreviated agenda has some language that doesn't exactly match with the staff report on this. And I was hopeful that the intent of the action would be to support the staff recommendations in the memo that reflect the need to have a reciprocal hold harmless clause.
And to Alderman Wolski, that is what I'm looking at with the description inside of the packet is the intent of the motion.
Okay.
Okay. Make sure that's noted. Does the second agree to that?
I agree.
All right, second agrees. Discussion. Alderman Padragula.
Yeah, I had 6 questions regarding the accompanying materials. Not quite so much on the whole harmless clause, but the context. Mr. Public Works Director, thank you. The first question I had is, do we have any even rough idea as to the expected completion date when we'll have the first amount of water flowing into the city from NAS?
President Janser, Alderman Padragula, our goal is to hopefully have water coming from the lake in approximately 4 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Second question I had was a very quick update on funding. I think you've given us things, and my memory isn't the greatest. Are we on target in terms of what we're allocating and what other people are allocating to have this completed in the 4 or 5 years, or whatever bonding period might have longer than that?
President Janser, Alderman Padragula, yes, I believe in working with the city manager and finance folks by enacting the 4/10 of the NAS sales tax back towards that. We will have the needed cash on hand to fund the projects going ahead. Right now, our estimate is it's probably going to take 6 to 8 years, probably 8 years, to complete all of the work that has to be done to finish up the NAS project. And of course, that is all dependent on how much money the legislature allocates to the state for their share.
So that'll be one of those issues we'll talk about in terms of legislative priorities, it sounds like. Third question I had was, and you've answered this before, and again, I apologize for my poor memory, but in terms of the infrastructure that is being built here and talked about in those lengthy or very detailed and helpful accompanying materials, how much of that infrastructure cost, the pipe, the treatment plant, et cetera, will that be incorporated into the rates that are paid by the users, as opposed to, say, the actual water users in Minot, as opposed compared to the other users?
Mr. President, Alderman Padragula, any costs that we have or capital that we can capitalize go into our rate study that we use. But some of these assets, you have to realize, since the state has a 65% cost share, aren't necessarily our assets, such as some of the pipe that's in the ground. You know, the expansion onto the water treatment plant will become our asset, even though that's being paid with federal dollars right now and city dollars. So any asset that we can capitalize through the NAS will go into our model for our rates.
So it's not like the citizens of Minot are subsidizing the citizens of West Hope or wherever might use the water. So I want to be very clear about that.
That's correct.
Okay, that's very good to hear. Fourth question would be, in terms of the Biota treatment plant, how will the quality of that filtration compare to what we do locally? I guess one of the things you've talked about, and publicly and privately with me, is that we need to have two sources of water. We can't just rely on our well fields, and we also just can't rely on the lake because things happen to the lake and to the pipeline. And I guess I'm wondering to what extent those would be interchangeable. I know everything will go through the pump part of our water treatment plant, but will the water coming from the lake, from the Biota plant, be potable here if something happens to our treatment facilities? Are they going to be commensurate with the quality of the water or not?
Mr. President, Alderman Padrigula, it will be, I guess, drinking water quality. But again, the plant isn't being designed for drinking water quality. The plant is being designed to address the biota transfer issues. So yes, there will be DAF air filtration, there will be normal filtration, there will be UV treatment, chlorine's added. The only thing that will have to be done when it gets to Minot, providing we're not, we intend to blend from our sundry line, and that's raw water. So there takes some more treatment. If we were to take just that water, then all we would have to do is some additional lime softening on it.
Hardening?
Yeah.
So if something did happen to our filtration part of the plant, we could just run it directly from the Biota plant, Biota treated plant?
Well, it would still run through our plant.
Right.
Because we also have UV disinfection
here
in our plant that we added under the Hazard Mitigation Project in the NAS High Service Pump Station as additional treatment, again, on top of all the other treatment that it's going to be getting.
Okay. Thank you. The fifth question I had was, again, a rough idea of the cost of the Biota treatment plant and who will be paying for that.
Right now, they've been looking at actually phasing the Biota plant. Originally, it was projected to be somewhere between 80 and $110 million. Right now, they think they can do it in phases. The first phase would be about $70 million, and then it would be able to be expanded as the need arises for additional capacity.
So we're not anticipating treating everything, for really long-term future use, but just kind of as it grows, as the use grows.
That's correct. And right now, the Biota plant, the feds have said that it is their responsibility for the cost. They don't necessarily have the money for it.
Right.
So that's where the state, in discussions we've had with the state is looking at advance funding all of that cost and then being paid back from the feds through their project.
And final question I have is, in terms of, do you have any idea as to the rough cost of the operation of the Biota plant and who would be paying for that?
Mr. President, Alderman Padrigula, I don't know what it would be. I would guess it would be fairly similar to the cost of, operations for our plant. It really depends, on if we have to run 24-hour operations on it, or if we can simply, to start out with, do 8-hour operations and then subsidize it with our water from our wells here so we don't have to do it. There will be some reduced treatment costs because they won't have the lime softening costs and some others. And right now, the feds have said that they will be responsible for the operations.
Wow.
They don't want to operate it. They want to have someone else do that. So they will probably contract with the state or the city of Minot if we wish to take it on to be the operator, and they will pay the operation cost of the Biota plant.
What does that cost roughly in terms of what we're paying now? You said it would be about equal to what we're paying for our local plant. Roughly.
I don't recall exactly what our water plant budget is.
6, 8, 10 mil?
No, I think it's around $5 or $6 million a year.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Those are very good answers, and give me a very nice, concise overview, kind of talking point, bullet point overview, because people often ask us questions as to how much and when and stuff, and in one place you've given me a really, really good answer, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Alderman Wolski.
President Janser, thanks. Dan, while we're talking about it, there's a piece that just sort of clicked in my mind, and I'm hoping you can kind of clarify the way I'm understanding this. But we're going to take raw water out of Lake Sakakawea. We're going to pipe it to max, where we're going to treat it. We're going to remove the biota, and we're going to do a significant amount of the water treatment in max. We're going to then pipe that to Minot. But on the way to Minot, 7 miles south of town or wherever that is, we're going to mix our treated water again with now raw, unwatered, untreated water. That's the point in the design equation where I guess I go, wait, what? Because it seems like we wouldn't want to mix raw, untreated water again with treated water. Is there more to that story that I'm not understanding?
Mr. President, Alderman Wolski, yes. When the water comes treated from the plant, like I said, it's not 100% drinking water quality, and that isn't the intent of that plant, although it will probably meet all the standards. It isn't designed to that. Also, when we add the lime softening here, in order to activate that lime, you need some chemicals in the water. So by blending our raw water, it'll actually help with activation of the lime softening process when it gets here.
Okay. Any further questions? I guess not. Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion of the motion to enter into this MOU? Seeing none, let's vote. Please call the roll.
Sitma,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Wolski.
Yes.
Motion carried. Item 12 is our next up, and that is the updated snow plan and revised ordinance regarding sidewalks. Is there a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Moved by Padragula,
Second.
seconded by Olson. Discussion. Alderman Padragula.
Just a brief comment. I like the snow removal plan. I've been through many snowfalls here, and the only comment I would make, and I'm glad it's being presented to us for reapproval every year, the only comment I'd make is to just be aggressive in declaring these snow emergencies. Having sat through several hearings and meetings where people have been very upset about snow removal, I think we're doing about the best we can with our current resources. And I'm saying this before the first snow flies, so it doesn't look like I'm being defensive. I think that the major systematic thing that I've seen is that big snowfalls happen and we don't get cars off the street early enough. So I would like to see us declare snow emergencies at really the first reliable sign of trouble. That seems to be the major issue. If we get those parked cars off the street, I think we're in okay shape. And I think lately citizens have been quite patient with us. And that's the only significant feedback I have, the only significant concern I have about the snow removal plan.
Okay. Alderman Wolski.
President Janser, thank you. I also appreciate the fact that that this is coming before us as a living document, and that we're looking at it on a regular basis for review and improvements. A couple things that caught my attention. One, we're looking at an ordinance again here, whereby I don't know what the changes are to the actual ordinance. So from a formatting perspective, please get us that content with either underlines or strikeouts so that I can get a sense of what's changed from the previous version. And I'm referencing the attached document, bullet item number 2 there. I couldn't tell what the changes were. And then as I did read through and kind of tried to make sense of this, there was some phrasing that did not make perfect sense for me, and it was the use of the phrase city sidewalks together. And I guess I don't know if that means sidewalks that are owned by us or sidewalks that are within the city, but it might be appropriate to add a bit of clarity to some of that phrasing in the document so that we understand specifically what we're referring to. On the whole, I think it's good that we're taking a closer look at sidewalks. Most of the complaints that I got last year related to snow removal were related to sidewalks. Most of them that I think were actually in the care of the city in some form. And so I appreciate that we're taking a closer look at that. I want to be on the ball for our pedestrians as well as our vehicles.
Okay. Further comments? Seeing none, call the roll.
Padragula?
Yes.
Wolski?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Motion carried. And now we come to our department presentation, and Chief Olson, you're up. Thank you.
President Janser and members of the committee, I would encourage you as I go through this presentation, if you have a question, just stop me in the middle and we'll stop on that slide, take care of it. I'm going to give you just a quick overview of the department, talk a little bit about a couple of challenges with staffing and calls for service and crime. And then I'm going to go into, for the most of the presentation, talk about technology that's used within the police department. Kind of give you an overview of all the different types of technology that we use.
Chief, is your microphone on? I guess I'm not hearing as well.
It is, but I'm not hearing myself on the speakers either, so. You want me to, there we go. Hey, somebody turned me up. So I'm going to conclude the presentation with a little briefing on what's known as the Siren Project, and I'll clue you into what that is. It's a project that the legislature is involved in regarding public safety. So I started out with a picture just to give you an update on our canine. I know we had talked a number of months ago about using some seizure funds, and we received a donation from Trinity Hospital towards a canine, and so you have a picture of our newest member who is named Macy, and that is a male German Shepherd. I'm not sure why a male is named Macy, but we don't name them, so. And Officer Matt Poppenfuss, who is currently undergoing training on how to handle Macy, and that'll be back here and in service in mid-October. Okay, the police department, just to give you a brief overview, is divided into 3 divisions: patrol, investigations, and administration. The patrol division currently has 61 sworn officers assigned to it, 3 non-sworn. That would be our 2 animal control and our parking control officer. They're divided into 3 shifts. They work 10-hour schedules. We have a day shift, an evening shift that goes all the way till 3 in the morning. And that shift overlaps with our night shift, which comes on at 10 and works until 8 in the morning. So there's a 5-hour overlap between afternoons and nights, and that gives us double coverage during a time when there's a lot of calls that require 2 officers, a lot of our more high-risk calls. That also includes our 4 SROs. We had the 2 new SROs in the middle school start with the school year, and they are on board, and so they are also assigned to patrol division. In the summertime, of course, they return to patrol and work the summer months with patrol. Investigations has 15 sworn officers and 1 non-sworn clerk. Of course, they conduct follow-up investigations. 3 of those investigators are assigned to the Ward County Narcotics Task Force, and 1 of the 15 officers is a compliance officer and liaison officer. They're a liaison with the state's attorney's office, and so that officer primarily does case review of the product that patrol officers are producing to make sure that it's good quality reports, and fills in any kind of deficiencies, make sure any deficiencies in the reports, so that the product going to the state's attorney's office for prosecution is a high quality product. And also, he's responsible for overseeing our compliance checks for alcohol, tobacco, taxi licenses, a number of other licenses that we oversee. In the administration division, there are 7 sworn and 6 non-sworn, primarily our records division. That they make up the records, the training, handle recruiting, as well as keeping up our policy and doing other management functions. We also oversee Minot Central Dispatch, which is made up of 15 dispatchers and 1 manager. They currently handle about 20,000 911 calls per year and about another 125,000 non-emergency calls. And again, they dispatch for many agencies, including the Sheriff's Department, many rural ambulance and fire departments, Burlington, Surrey, etc. And we also have some oversight of the municipal court, which includes, of course, the judge and 3 clerks. What we do, patrol, of course, primarily first responders, responding to accidents, crime, public safety issues. We're responsible for enforcement of laws, investigation, license compliance, which I already touched on. We do a lot of public outreach. I could give probably an hour talk just on all the public outreach that we do. And then we have specialty units, including our SWAT and bomb teams, and they are involved in regional response. So, for instance, our bomb team gets a lot of its funding federally, and because the FBI doesn't have a bomb team in this area, we handle any federal jurisdiction bomb calls, and in exchange for that, we get training and funding. But we cover the northwest quarter of North Dakota with our bomb team, and much of the northwest quarter of North Dakota with our SWAT team. One question I often get asked is, if our SWAT team goes out of our jurisdiction, is there any reimbursement for our costs? And the answer is yes. Through the state, they've set up a special operations fund that we can apply to reimbursement for overtime and other expenses that we incur as we go out to other jurisdictions. And then, of course, we have
Chief,
yes.
yeah, is that funding in that reimbursement program adequate? Is it working to the degree that we need it to, or are there places where it just doesn't quite get us to the level we need it?
For the most part, it reimburses our costs for overtime, for fuel. In cases where we've expended tear gas, it will replace munitions. It's not all-encompassing. For instance, in a recent incident, we had our armored Bearcat unit took some rounds. The windshield was damaged, and that was not reimbursed by that fund. So we had about $4,000 damage to that vehicle. And in that case, we filed a insurance claim with North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, which paid that claim for us. So it doesn't cover all expenses, but it does cover most. Okay. This is a snapshot of our, what we would call a CFS, or a call for service. Call for service can be anything from an animal call up to a homicide, so it's pretty much runs the gamut. And you can see from 2007 to 2017, we have increased from, a little bit lower than 30,000 back in 2007, 2008, up to in excess of 40,000. And we increased again last year in 2017, and we are on pace to increase another 1.5% this year. So often when I'm in the public, people ask me, are things slowing down? And for us, the answer is no. We're continuing to see a steady increase in calls. I don't know if I'm causing that feedback. You guys hearing feedback? Nothing? Okay. Okay, just a brief synopsis of some challenges that the department is facing. Staffing, I would say recruitment and retention has been our #1 issue over the last 6 or 7 years. Of course, when we have our annual budgets prepared, we want to make sure we have the correct amount of staff. We have increased the amount of sworn officers since 2012 from 65 up to 83. That is in concert with both the population increase, the calls for service increase that we've seen, and also with adding the 2 additional SROs. A challenge every year is to maintain our current technology, training, and equipment. And as we go through this presentation, you'll see that there's a significant cost every year in maintaining the department's technology. We want to make sure that we are keeping up to date on training, which includes in-service training that all staff go through every year, our new officer training that we're onboarding, and then we have certain officers that have specialties that are trained in. For instance, arson investigation or forensics analysis of computers, crime scene response unit doing specialty training, SWAT training. There's a lot of specialty training that the department needs to stay up to date on as well. Policy development, maintenance, and training, and I'll talk a little bit more in a bit about Lexapol, which is our policy module. And then we have internal management challenges that are just ongoing, whether it's staffing decisions. We are running below our authorized strength right now is 83. As we stand today, we have 73 employed. So making decisions on where to deploy staff, getting complaints. We don't get a lot of complaints, but when we do, we want to make sure we're responsive to citizen complaints. And on occasions when we have to carry out discipline, that those procedures are fair.
Chief, I appreciate the opportunity to interrupt.
Sure.
When I hear you say something like we are down maybe 12 or 13% below full strength, 73 out of 83. How does that filter out in terms of its impact on the department and the way you guys operate? What accommodations are you making as a result of having to be shorthanded?
Well, right now the shortages are all absorbed by our patrol division. So we have a minimum staffing level for each shift. So when we run short on staffing, we have to default to overtime. And so our overtime costs get driven up higher by being short-staffed. Obviously, you can't do as much discretionary enforcement, traffic enforcement, for instance. There are times during the day when our officers frequently are going call to call. So when we get speeding complaints or you get complaints in neighborhoods about traffic issues, it's harder to divert resources during those busy times to do what I would call discretionary enforcement. So it impacts us in that way. We have tried not to, because of our increased caseloads and investigations, and with the increase that we've seen in drug activity, we haven't been pulling from investigations or our drug task force as we had in years past to try and maintain staffing levels on patrol. But part of that, and I made the case a number of years ago to increase our staffing levels, going from 65 officers when I became chief now up to 83, has allowed us a bit of a cushion so that, I mean, we're virtually running at 85%, my whole F on the numbers, because we know we're always going to be 10 or 15% down. Let's see. So just briefly touching on crime and some of the issues on the street. Drug-related crime, of course, is a very serious issue facing our community. We're seeing increases in that. That spills over to property and violent crime increases. I think all you need to do is read the newspaper, and you can see almost every day there's individuals that are involved in either violent or property crimes and are often additionally charged with drug-related offenses. So that has been very much of a challenge for our department and our community. We're also seeing a large increase in mental health-related calls, suicidal subjects, and that. So it's a very busy time on the streets for our officers. There's frequent high-risk incidents to themselves. We had an officer that received a minor injury just the other night dealing with a subject that was violently resisting them after breaking into a house. So it's very busy on the street for the officers. This just gives you a snapshot, and this was a slide I presented at the Hub City Interim Committee presentation. And basically what it shows is on the column on the right, that represents the crime in Fargo, West Fargo, Bismarck, Grand Forks for the categories of murder, aggravated assault, burglary, robbery, and motor vehicle theft. So for those 5 crime categories, you can see that the non-hub cities had a 28% increase over that same period of time. And we saw a 94% increase in that same period of time. So, and that was typical of Williston and some of the other hub cities in the middle of the oil patches, that we saw not just a crime increase that went along with the population increase. We saw about triple the crime increases we did a population increase. So that's what we've been dealing with in the past 6 years. I already mentioned the sworn officers increase. Currently have 8 openings. 2 have accepted conditional offers and 6 additional opens we're testing in November for those positions. The good news on staffing, Minot Central Dispatch, we have been very stable on staffing for almost a year now. We haven't hired a dispatcher, so we're very happy with that situation. It seems to have stabilized. This just gives a brief look at staffing over the years. I know you guys have seen these slides before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, so I can move on to my main presentation. This talks about experience levels, and again, you guys can look at that at your leisure. I can send you this presentation. The bottom line on this one, just talking about experience that really is kind of striking, is that 20 of our street officers, if you count the 8 that are vacant, 20 of them have less than 2 years of experience. So we are dealing with very inexperienced officers. Everybody starts on patrol, and so they absorb all the new officers and the inexperienced. The good news is we've had very few complaints. We've had very few problems considering the amount of turnover that we've had. It's been amazing. Yes?
Directly related to our turnover, are there any trends that we've noticed specifically with regards to the, we're watching these officers get to year 2 or to year 3 or to year 4 or a specific level of training and then going? I guess that's one of the things that I've been asked a few times is are we a training ground for other departments and other places? And obviously that wage benefits, all those things factor into that, but has there been specific use or have you seen any trends like that?
We have seen some of that happen, in particular with state agencies. One of the goals that I strive for as chief was to make Minot the destination law enforcement. If you wanted to be a police officer in Minot, you wanted to work for Minot PD, and not only for the quality of the department, but also from a pay and benefit standpoint. We are not there on pay and benefits yet. So when we lose an officer to the state agency, we lost a 12-year veteran to the state BCI not too long ago. We had many, many hours of training into him as a forensic specialist. And so it does happen. We also lose a lot of officers in the first year. They either wash out or decide law enforcement isn't for them, or perhaps go home, or we have a number of different reasons. But our highest turnover rate is within the first year of employment. These are one of our success stories. 5 years ago, we hired these 3 officers from Minnesota, and we are very glad that we are still hanging on to these 3 officers. They put down roots in our community, and they are very much shining stars for our department. We are recently, with our recruiting and retention efforts, this is an ad that is currently being displayed up at the airport. You'll notice some electronic billboards around town. We're specifically trying to target the Minot Air Force Base with a billboard that is right by Ruthville and is geared towards people that are exiting the Air Force. So take a look at that if you're out by Ruthville. And I wanted to make a point to thank you for your vote on the first reading in support of the pay and benefit plan, and we're very hopeful that that is going to turn our tide on retention and recruitment. So I realize I'm taking a little bit longer than my 15 minutes here, but so we'll get into the technology side. I'll try and go quickly, but again, if you have a question, please stop me. So quickly, the amount of technology in a patrol car right now is a radar unit, MDC. That includes what we call mobile version of our software. Our software provider is a company named Tyler. They used to be New World, and Tyler bought out New World. So if you hear those 2 names, that's why. So there's a number of other programs, including Trax Accident Software. That is a state mandated accident software system that we use for filing state accident reports. They have an in-car camera system, mobile radio, light, siren, defibrillator, and a cell phone. A patrol officer, this gives an example of the different types of equipment that they're carrying. And my point on this is that every year at budget time, we need to make sure that this equipment is being kept current. A portable radio, just as an example, is about a $5,000 investment. A mobile radio for a patrol car is a $5,000 investment. There seems to be a theme here, but an in-car camera system for a patrol car is about a $5,000 investment. A mobile data computer for a patrol car is pretty close to $5,000. So there's a lot of expensive items that every year we try and update so many within our fleet to keep our equipment current. Digital evidence is something that has changed in law enforcement. There's a lot more digital evidence than there used to be, no big surprise there. But all of these systems, whether it's body cameras, in-car video, or other types of digital evidence, all require hardware, a management utility of some kind, and storage, digital storage. So all of those systems impact our budget and our manpower to make sure that we are properly managing that evidence. And it could be everything from external evidence, that's somebody captures something on a cell phone or a surveillance, home surveillance system or a business, to the devices that we carry ourselves. Other computer programs, I already talked about the tracks. Odyssey is a software program that our courts uses. LERMS stands for Law Enforcement Records Management System. Again, that's part of our Tyler New World software package. We are nearly paperless at this point. This year in the 2019 budget will take us to about 100% paperless with the Brazos ticketing module for that, which means that our officers will be able to issue paperless tickets. It'll print out a paper copy for the offender, but we won't have any paperwork on our end for ticketing, for parking tickets, for warning tickets, and so on. And this also integrates with our court software so that the physical input of data, for instance, right now, every time we write a parking ticket, somebody is taking that paper ticket and typing that information into a database. And this will eliminate that as well. So we hope to save on some man hours. A couple other software or programs that we subscribe to. Lexipol is our policy. And this is a model policy that it's net-based. Every officer can access it through the internet. They have a training module to it. So every month they take a test on our policy manual, which is, there's a product called TLO, and that is a product that we subscribe to. It basically helps us locate people, gives us previous addresses from a number of different databases. Leads Online is our program that is mandated that all our pawn shops use Leads Online to report every transaction. So anybody that makes a transaction at a pawn shop has to report that daily to the police department using the Leads Online software. And then our crime scene investigators and accident reconstructionists also have some specific software. We'll get into our dispatch center. So our radio infrastructure includes consoles for our dispatchers. We have several towers around town that have antennas on them. That includes repeaters for our radio signals, something called a voting receiver, which is another type of a repeater for the radio signal. Of course, backup generators, uninterrupted power source. There's our 911 phone system. Each computer console, there's 5 consoles in our dispatch center where our dispatchers can operate from. Each one of them has 4 computers dedicated to it. So there's 20 computers just to run those 5 consoles. And they include one for the 911 system. We have our emergency alert system, the outdoor warning sirens, of which there are 18 in our city, but there are also, our dispatch center sets them off for all the rural communities in Ward County as well. They have a teletype system that is connected to the National Crime Information Center to run wants and warrants checks. We have the Code Red program where we can do reverse 911 calls, and we have an iPause program that will contact all cell phone subscribers within an area. So if we want to circle an area of town, contact everybody in that area that has a cell phone with a text message or a warning message, we have that ability to do that. It includes a computer-aided dispatch system, which basically is a records-keeping docket-type system. That includes now the AVL module, which was purchased through this year's budget, which is the automated vehicle locating. So all of our ambulance, fire trucks, and police cars, Ward County Sheriff's deputy cars, are all tracked with the AVL system, so they show up on a computer screen that is superimposed over a map of that area. The officers in the field can see it, so they can see where they are. They can see where the call is, what type of call they're going to. The supervisors have access to that. The dispatchers can see it to see which units are available. So that has been a big improvement to our CAD system. And lastly, I'll finish up with the Siren Project. What that is it's the statewide interoperable radio network land mobile radio project. This started about 4 years ago with 2 legislative sessions ago, and it was looking at the radio infrastructure statewide for public safety. So that's ambulance, rural fire, law enforcement. It includes public works as being critical to responding to incidents. And there was a study done to analyze the status of the state's radio system. And the study basically showed that much of the state's radio infrastructure is reaching end of life and end of support for the equipment that's in place and is going to be in need of replacement. Rather than to continue down the same road of having each county or each city replace their radio equipment with what we have now is a bunch of not connectable systems. So Minot, we have our own system, Williston has a system, every county does. They looked at doing what's called a trunked radio system that is interoperable. And most states have done this. And so the study came back with a recommendation for a plan to implement that, and that would upgrade all and link all public safety in North Dakota under one radio system. That has tremendous advantages for responding to crisis incidents, for working together as agencies. It's public safety grade, which means it has very high reliability. It also comes with expense. So the price ticket, according to the study and according to the information we have right now, for a statewide upgrade of all the radio system is about $160 to $170 million. So the last legislature authorized a RFP to be issued. The North Dakota ITD department is the lead agency on that. They issued an RFP and received some responses from vendors that they're currently undergoing a contract negotiation with a preferred vendor to come to a contract. Once that contract is established, we will go into this next legislative session to really nail down funding to see if this project is going to be fully funded to go forward. They currently, in the last session, they added a 50-cent phone tax for every line, every landline, every cell phone line in North Dakota. It has a 50-cent tax that is going towards the Siren Project, but that it will be inadequate to fully fund this project. So the legislature is going to be looking at 2 things: how to fund this project, and the other major question is, what is the local share versus state share of this project going to be?
Chief, regarding this particular program, where are we at in the life cycle of the equipment that might be subject to exchange or not exchange, but an adoption of a new system? Is the stuff we've made recent new investments in, or is our equipment also reaching the edge of its life?
So some of our equipment, Alderman Walski, President Chancellor, is reaching end of life. For instance, like our repeaters. Those particular models will be end of support by our current vendor, Motorola. So if that piece of equipment fails, we'd have to purchase a new piece of equipment. They're not making parts to repair that particular piece of equipment anymore. Many of our mobile and portable radios are within support still for several years, that they're not at risk of that. So a lot of our infrastructure is currently up to date, but it's not going to be able to be used with a new project. And the main reason for that is we are currently running on a VHF radio signal, and the signal that was selected by the project is an 800 megahertz signal, which is a different frequency band. And so basically, if it's not compatible with 800 frequency, it would have to be replaced in this project. So the requirements of the RFP was 95% mobile coverage within each region of the state, basically divided into 4 regions, and 85% mobile coverage. It would have interoperability with adjoining states. They would need a number of frequencies to be licensed for this. It would also involve the ability to over-the-air program radios, for instance. So if our radio needs a programming update, it could be pushed out to the radio without it being brought to a technician to upgrade it, which isn't as big a deal for a municipal agency as it is for some of the rural agencies and the ones that have people scattered out geographically. It would have a logging system, just like our current system does, recording all traffic. Probably one of the biggest parts of public safety in our state that is in dire need of upgrading their radio systems is rural fire departments and rural ambulance services. So this would greatly benefit them if this project went forward, which of course has to include a paging system. And this is my last slide here, upcoming legislative issues. The Siren Project funding and cost share is going to be a huge issue going into this session for public safety. Dr. Padgula talked the other day about traffic fines. This has been an issue, ongoing issue for many years for law enforcement, in that speeding tickets and stop sign tickets and red light tickets, which we get a lot of complaints about, are still $10 and $20, and they've been that since the mid-'70s or early '70s. So there's very little incentive from a fine standpoint for people to obey those laws. So any complaints that I get about speeding or stop signs around towns, red light violations, we do what we can, and it's not to shift responsibility, but I always give a plug to somebody to contact their legislatures if they think that something needs to be done to address that situation. And the last one is asset forfeiture money. We do receive, when we seize cash or proceeds from drug sales or transactions, and we initiate asset forfeiture, we're able to recoup that money and use it to supplement our budgets and to purchase things such as Canine Macy. The last time there was a session that wanted to strip that money from local departments, and it would send it all to the state general fund. So if there's another bill, which we anticipate another bill will come forward, we'll be obviously not in favor of that.
Chief, I appreciate that being on the list here to talk about. It was actually, I was going to bring it up during our agenda item earlier. Do we have a formally adopted policy right here in Minot in terms of the manner in which we conduct our asset forfeiture? Do we conduct that ourselves, or is it more operated by the state and then dispersed to us? I'm curious about the operation of the program.
So virtually all of our asset forfeiture money is done by our narcotics task force. We have an MOU with them and the state's attorney's office. The three primary agencies in the narcotics task force are the state, Ward County, and Minot Police Department. And so currently, if there was $10,000 that was forfeited, each jurisdiction would get 30% of that, and the state's attorney would get 10%, and that's according to an MOU.
Do we have an adopted policy in terms of when it is appropriate to use asset forfeiture? I think one of the reasons this has been brought to the legislature's attention is I don't know the circumstances, but there is the perception of abuse, whereby there is some incentive for law enforcement to, conduct asset forfeit exercises because they're going to be getting the dollars. Now, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just suggesting I think that's why the legislature, it has risen to their attention level. And so to sort of maybe be able to speak back against that perception, is it appropriate for us to have a formalized policy of when we use this practice in terms of the types of assets that do get seized and the circumstances of?
So the current procedure, Alderman Walski, is that the drug task force, when they seize cash in accordance with a search warrant or an arrest procedure, and there's a drug nexus, they will initiate asset forfeiture through the state's attorney's office, which then has due process through a district court judge, and there's an opportunity for the holder of those assets to come and explain why that isn't drug proceeds. And then as far as the spending of the money, it's left at the discretion of the department. We have historically used it to purchase items that either we weren't able to get through normal budgeting. You know, if something fell at a budget cut, but we still felt it was an important item for our department. Asset forfeitures were used for that. And I testified against this bill last session and challenged the proponents to come up with one example in North Dakota where they could show that law enforcement had abused this process, and there was none given. There have been examples of abuse in other parts of the country, but I believe that North Dakota law enforcement is very aware of those, sensitive to that issue, and has exercised good judgment in this area. And I think that's my last, that's all I have.
Okay. Chief Olson, thank you for all of that information and giving us a little insight today into the police department. Any questions, Alderman Patagula?
Yeah, I have some comments. I know the hour's late and the chief has been on for a long time, but these are really critical issues, and I feel an obligation to raise them. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Jason, for the quality of your presentation. You've gone number 2, but the first 2 have been very good. Second, I'm very pleased that you were able to list very concisely, I think, frankly, the challenges that our police department faces and law enforcement in general faces. As I look forward to it, sounds like our city manager sees the first and the second as templates for other departmental presentations. This is something that's very important to me, that we be honest and candid and identify problems that we see or we have. Part of the thing I'd like to see even more of is a consideration or a listing of some issues that we will be facing. I think Josh got into that somewhat, but things that we need to be mindful of, you know, a year, 5 years, maybe 10 years down the road. You mentioned the conversion to a new radio system. Public Works has previously informally mentioned that we're going to have a water upgrade in terms of our water treatment plant. So that's one of the things I'm going to be listening for and looking for is what's down the road. What do we need to start planning for, thinking about? I'm also very pleased, both in terms of police and fire departments, to see our new, more aggressive recruitment efforts, aggressive in the good sense of the word. I want to mention, too, that my comments here are not just those of a policymaker, of an alderman, but as a forensic psychologist. I've worked with law enforcement since 1977 in multiple capacities with very different departments. About probably half to 3/4 of my work is forensic psychology. So I'm intimately familiar, I think, quite well compared to other individuals in terms of the challenges that you face, and that's part of the reason I'm so interested and so involved, because I know how challenging a job it is. The 2 comments I'd make, besides the numbers that you've presented and just the narrative comments, from my perspective as a clinician, as a forensic psychologist, is that the severity of calls and crimes that we've gotten, not just here in Minot, but I think nationally, has increased dramatically over the years. I think some of it is tied into drug use, but my sense is, and the sense of my colleagues in forensic psychology, is that the world's gotten a lot crazier, and people act a lot crazier, and they act out. They violate rules and laws more so than they used to, and when they do that in an escalated, much more dangerous fashion for themselves, for bystanders, for victims certainly, and for law enforcement personnel. So I think I would add that perspective. It's not just the numbers going up, but it's the quality of the crime and the poor behavior. The other thing from my perspective, as someone who's worked with recruitment and training and correction and sometimes termination of officers, is that this idea of experience is critical. You can be a good truck driver one place or another place, but if you're a law enforcement officer, there's something about the locality, and you can transfer as an accountant or a truck driver or whatever, an IT person, from one organization to another, I think, fairly easily, fairly quickly. But as a patrol officer in particular, even as a detective, an investigator, I think a lot of it is situation specific, and a lot of it is very closely related to experience. And if you only have a year or 2, you really don't know what's going on in that community with the kind of people you'll be dealing with, both victims and criminals. So that's something that doesn't come out often enough. You say, yeah, the average age is, or average longevity is 2.5 years. That really is a critical thing. It's not like 2 years being an accountant or 2 years being a truck driver or secretary or whatever. There is something, you need to know the culture, you need to know the context. From my perspective, that's one of the things I worry about, not just the years, but the quality of the experience. And finally, to be perfectly candid, the thing that keeps me up as an alderman we get complaints about snow removal, we get complaints about taxes and stuff. I mean, I need to say this just to be on the record. I wish Shannon were here to hear, because he's also an emotional person. The thing that really keeps me up is a serious injury or a death to one of our city staff, particularly a police officer or firefighter, or the serious injury death to a citizen. And I think we need to do everything to prevent that. That's part of the reason I've argued since my first days on the council for better equipment, for better training, for better manpower. This is one area in which if mistakes happen, if luck goes the wrong way, people die. And I think that's very, very different from most kinds of business, most kinds of activities. If a librarian misshelves a book or miscategorizes something, person can't find it, yeah. If an accountant makes a mistake on a spreadsheet, the counts don't balance. But in this line of work, if mistakes are made, or again, if luck goes against us, people can die. And that's the thing that terrifies me. That's the thing I hope I never, have to experience when I'm on the council. I hope you never have to experience as a chief. But that's qualitatively different, the risk to citizens and to the people who work for us. Is qualitatively different from any other kind of work, the public safety field. So I very much, respect what you and your officers do, and that's why I feel a particular sense of obligation to make sure that you have everything you need to do your job. And again, I thank you for this very candid and very informative report.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Chief, thank you very much. Yep. Good report. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our agenda today, and with that, we'll be adjourned.